Hey everyone, welcome back to the Beyond Business podcast. We have another great show for you today with Dr. Dan Wallis, where we're going to unpack the idea of winning at home first. This is not necessarily the thing, it's kind of countercultural, and a lot of people don't think that if you're intentional at home first, it's going to have an impact on your business. But Dr. Dan talks a lot of these ideas pretty humbly. You know, he knows he's still working on getting this right, but has seen a profound impact on being intentional and being plugged in with the family first, and how that actually has a powerful crossover to his business life. A little background before we dive in. He went to chiropractic school in Atlanta and has now had his practice Elevate Chiropractic here in Fort Collins for 6 years. And throughout that has actually started another brand called Patriot Hunter, where it's all about giving back to vets. So he's someone that's very intentional in what he does, loves to have a strong vision and heartbeat behind the brands that he has. And if you're interested, check out his wife's brand, mamaforhealth.com. If you are interested in that side of things, want to get all the little plugs in before we start. But excited for you to join the conversation about what we are diving into today and how we think this is an idea that isn't talked a lot about a lot, that is going to have a pretty profound impact, not just on your business, but on your life and your family life, no matter what season you're in. So excited for you to join us. Well, Dr. Dan, I'm going to call you that from now on because it just flows. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Yeah. We were really excited to dive in. Obviously, our guests and listeners got a good background from you from our intro. So to dive right in, the direction we've taken this podcast, we want to take an idea or topic and just unpack it for however long it takes. And when we were asking you to come on, the idea that stuck out to you was winning at home first, or this idea of focusing on success at home first. So can you maybe unpack first and foremost why that was the one that jumped off the page to you? And even from your text with Hunter, I could feel the passion coming off the phone. Yeah, so I would love to just kind of unpack that first, and then there's other details we'll dive into, but would love to hear your heart behind why that idea and topic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, I heard this one time and it hit me big time. And mentor of mine was talking. He was like, if you're out there and you're on the stages and you're, you got the followers and you're doing this stuff and you're showing off, like you got all this success, but your marriage is a mess. You're, maybe you're being unfaithful to your wife. Your kids don't even know you, let alone like you. You're a fraud. And just like, boom, like you're a fraud, if that's the direction that you're going. And I think the reason that I've become really passionate about that topic specifically, and specifically for men, but just in general, this can be for anyone. I think we live in a culture right now that almost idolizes, right? Like the picture of success, the grind, the drive, I'm gonna sell the books and do the videos in front of my Ferrari, and then the jets behind me, and then we got to grind at any cost, any expense. But then you look a little deeper, and it's like the home life's a mess. Yeah. And so, in a culture these days too, especially from my generation, I feel like and below, the values of family and life and like sewing in and creating a legacy, right, are, I feel like, being diminished and almost like put aside. In some ways, people don't even want to talk about the family anymore. You know what I mean? We don't even want to talk about that kind of thing. Like we create success with our financial wealth. And I believe that we've got to start flipping that script to be like, no, crush it at home, like create a great life, like create a legacy for your family. And then I believe you can do both, right? Like go be successful. Absolutely. Like let's go, do the things we want to do.
So
and,
good.
And get there, quote, right? But we can do both.
Yeah, so that's really good.
Just to start.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. I love that. And yesterday I was reading a book about King Solomon, and I think what you just said spoke to and affirmed what this book was saying, which is essentially that, when King Solomon took over David's throne, God asked him, what do you want? And he asked for wisdom. and he quickly became the richest man that ever lived. Like he made Jeff Bezos look like a chump.
Right.
And looking at his life, I mean, he turned over every stone, looking for value, looking for significance, through his wealth, through his prosperity, through wives, through whatever. And like at the end of the day, he's like, everything's meaningless. Like this is all meaningless.
Yeah.
So I think that reading that book yesterday was convicting. Hearing you talk about that is convicting because, man, I don't ever want to be at that place where I'm like, man, I've turned over every stone and have found out that like nothing really matters outside of like the really important things.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I want to make sure we don't miss it in that way. I think that's so good.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, and here's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I think it's important to address this too. Like there is an appropriate time to like really put your nose you know, down and get after it.
Right.
But the problem is, I think that we are so inundated with information and with comparison and with, you know, all these different things that push that can be healthy short term becomes the habit and becomes the normal. And you know, you hear it all the time. It's like, okay, I've got my own goals, right? Like I've got goals for my life, for my family, you know, and all these things. But it's like you get there and it's never enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's never enough. And so now we're going for the next thing. And maybe it didn't look the way I thought it would. So now I'm pushing for this thing. And it's like, okay, well, that was enough. Now I'm going for this status mark, you know, whatever. And all of a sudden you wake up and your kids are in high school and it's like, ooh, dang. And so we got to be so intentional early and have these conversations.
If you're not living intentionally, it just becomes a treadmill, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Have you ever watched Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yeah.
I love a lot of him.
Totally.
But there are times where he just pushes to like grind 24/7. At least at the beginning of his career, he was pushing that. Sure. He's for sure veered away from that a little. But I used to be all about like the grind 24/7. Like I'm working on the weekends, I'm working on the evenings. Now that I have like a baby boy and a wife and all that stuff, I'm like, man, I just don't want to do that. Like I have no desire to do that.
Yeah.
So there has to be a balance, and living intentionally is the key.
Yeah.
So
and can you do both? And I believe that yes, maybe that's kind of where we're going today.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Would love to unpack the specifics to you of what it means to win at home. I know, again, when I was reading the conversation that you and Hunter had, you had said, you know, it doesn't just count to take your family to Disney World, or you can't just go take a beach vacation. I think that counts as time with your family. It has to be seed sown before that. So on paper, if you were to write, you know, a small essay for me or whatever it is about what it means to win at home and living intentionally, we'll focus on that side first because we are going to talk about doing both well. But yeah, what does it look like to win at home first? Like some of the actionable steps, the specifics that I think people can apply, whether it's they're married with no kids or married and have kids, or even if it's just them and they have a desire to be married and they're not married yet. You know, I think there's a spectrum there.
Yeah, totally. I think by default, I'll always kind of jump into as like a father, right? And then we can kind of go into something because, you know, for me, that's like husband, father is like A1. You know, Dave Ramsey always talks about like the A1 steak sauce. You know what I mean? It's like, what's like the number one thing that we're going to make sure gets done today? And here's what I think it can mean. You know, when I get to the end of my life, I want to hear and know my wife and my daughters and whatever kids God blesses me with, you know, after this one. I want to know from them that like dad was there, you know what I mean? And I never questioned like the love of my earthly father.
Come on.
I mean, in the moments, you know, he was there when I was sad. He was there when, you know, there was just no question, like a legacy of like deep-seated relational intentionality. That's it. And so like that's the goal for me. Whether I have a jet and $100 million and, you know, if that happens, we're good, man. You know, and I believe that's what matters to people as well. And so what's that look like? I think the power of intentional habits is really important. I think a lot of times we have, especially as men, we have really good intentions, but we're not good at communicating them, especially to our wives, where it's like, like maybe I like have a great intention in growing our wealth or our freedom or our relationship or our marriage, right? But we don't communicate it great or set up the expectations. And so I had a mentor the other day talking on a Zoom call, mastermind, and he was talking about this, and he was like, and I want to share this with all of the listeners, is that can we create those habits in such a way that it becomes intentional? That almost seems like the key here. But we communicate up front. And so what that might look like, like just tactically is like to my wife, I go, hey, it matters to me to like really dive in and sow into our marriage. And over the next 90 days, like I'm really going to be intentional. And I've kind of found, these 3 books that I'm going to read, I'm going to listen to this podcast, and I'd like to make sure, we carve out the time to kind of sit and go through it. But what that looks like for me is that 3 days a week on like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from like 5 a.m. to 5:30, I'm going to be diving into this topic hard and creating a habit around it. How does that fit for you? Like, does that feel good, for your timing, for your schedule, for all these different things? Like, get that agreement, right? And then she's on board, of course, like, she's on board. It's like there's support now. There's all these different things, and then you can be intentional, set the habit. You almost have that kind of back-seated accountability, and we're actually doing it, versus like all of a sudden, she's finding that I'm getting up and I'm doing my own thing.
Right.
Maybe I don't communicate it. Now maybe I'm not being super disciplined on the timing. I started at 6:15 and because I wanted to sleep a little bit, and now I'm bumping into her yoga time, and I'm like, well, I'm trying to work on growing our marriage, and she's like, well, I would love to have some time for myself too. You know what I mean? Like, you can easily do a good thing and do it in the wrong way by not setting intentional habits. Wow. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably and you can do that in any area. It's like, I want to learn more about personal finance. And so, hey, like, this is how, like, the things that the resources, that I've come up with. And this is when I'd like to study that. I'd like to do that from like, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. Like, I know that you like to do, whatever. We just get that agreement up front and then go for it and stop making excuses. Right?
Man, that agreement is crucial. That communication piece is huge, man.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. So many people, especially men in the business world, want to live intentional lives, but they don't communicate that with their wives.
Oh, dude. Yeah, dude.
That's so
I'm
good.
like, I think I should write that down. I'm like, that was good. And I don't, struggle with that.
Yeah.
I'm like, where's the pen? You got like,
right.
Like, because that's the thing. And I think, I want to be super clear, like in a humble place, like I'm right there with everyone else. We're trying to figure this out. And I guess I just hope that more of these conversations happen, with young entrepreneurs, and young people in general. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's powerful how you said the intentions most of the time are not bad. Sure. It's just when you don't communicate that, then all of a sudden you're bumping heads, and all of a sudden it seems like it's a selfish move when the heart of it was good. The heart of it was you want to run your business better and have more profit and love on your family more through that. But if you're not communicating that, it's going to be a miss. Sure. Yeah, that's good. So this was a unique opportunity based on the topic, but I kind of want to do like a little role play. It doesn't have to be like an actual role play, but the question was phrased around pretend you're mentoring Hunter. He's a new dad, younger marriage, is somebody who has a business, running it pretty well. And let's pretend you're in a coffee shop, you're mentoring him, and he's bragging about the grind. He's talking about, oh man, I put in like 10 hours this weekend and business is really good. And I have 10 new opportunities. And I only slept like 3 hours last night because I was so in the world. And you can tell he's starting to push toward that fraud status because his home life and his wife is stressed and the baby's not taken care of and he's not around for them very much. What would that conversation look like? And obviously, this would be someone you have a close relationship with and you have the keys to speak into them.
Sure.
So I have a couple different questions off of that, but I think the first one was, how would you navigate pushing back on that? Especially a young guy who has a baby and you can catch him before the regret is there and his kids are teenagers and he's missed it.
Yeah, that's good. I guess, how I'd want to start that is like, how define success for me, right? Like, what's it look like to you? Like, what are we going for? You know what I mean? Define that. No, listen, and kind of see what, I don't know if we're actually going to role play this or not, you know what I mean? But,
well, we can't because this isn't actually Hunter. I was going to say that's my caveat to this is not Hunter's life.
Of course, yeah. No,
so you'd have to get some acting.
I know Hunter's family well. Like, he's doing a great job as a young man. But yeah, I mean, I think, just to listen, because I think like even like thinking about that, it's like, okay, well, I want to make, $1 million a year. Like, okay. Yeah. So what are you going to do when you make $1 million a year? And well, I'm going to buy this house. I'm going to do, all right. Why? And just, I mean, I think it's, if you can learn to dig those questions out and then kind of just to say like, it's good to work hard. We're designed, especially like men are designed to go and to work and to make a difference and to impact and to do these things. Like we need to do that, but I would just want to ask like, at the end of it, like, what's your hope? Like that same question we talked about just a minute ago, like, what's your hope? Like, with this thing, because what it feels like is that, like that's kind of becoming an idol. It's becoming an idol of significance, to do this in a certain way. And, let's talk about it, like how can, and not like to put the person down, because I'm there too, me too, right? Kind of a me too conversation, been there, grew up in that, whatever it looks like. And this is, maybe what I want to do better. And can that, the way that I might want to live, can that create influence in itself? You know what I mean? To have a great life, because you do those things because you think you want to have a great life. Right. And, but then if life at home isn't great, I mean, that's where you hear the problems, where it becomes like the work is like, that's where I'm on, that's where I'm like on top of the mountain, and everybody's kind of, and I've got this person now who's like, telling me how great I'm doing. And, it just like, it's a slippery slope, dude.
Right. Right. And most of the time the root with those conversations normally ends up kind of what you said, significance. Like that person is wanting to feel significant. Yeah. They want to make $1 million a year to feel significant. Totally. Want to buy that house to feel significant. So it's like, that's the root of a lot of it. So you got to figure out that piece. And I agree with you, man. It starts at home.
One is a hard thing, right? Like, and is that okay sometimes to feel like, okay, how do I create significance? But can I flip that script in a culture that idolizes, the show? Can we flip that script and go, what I'm going for is the person who I know is actually sowing into their marriage. I know is sowing into their kids. I know is, they're showing up to the, to T-ball into the recital. And, it's like the priority is there.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you see it. And that become the example rather than I don't even know if this dude's married, let alone, intentional with his wife or faithful. Right. So, I think you wish you'd see some more of that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
That was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting how you dove into a method that I've heard across a lot of spaces, whether it's from sales to marriage to something else. And it's the 3 whys. If you ask why 3 times in a row, you're going to get to the root pretty fast. Sure. And you're going to open the other person's mind up, and they're going to start asking, oh, I've never actually thought why I need $1 million. Or maybe I'm realizing that my reason why I need $1 million isn't that good.
Right.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's not bad all the time either. I mean, I've had people help me think bigger. It's like, dude, why don't you plan on giving your church $1 million a year?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that means, so it's just like, it's okay to think big. Right. So that's why I want to make sure it's clear. Like, we're not going to be, I don't subscribe to like poverty mindset just so I can like pretend that, it's like, there's just a healthy harmony. Right. That I think is possible when God puts something on your heart to create influence and to make an impact. You go do it with the mindset of like seeking Him, seeking wisdom all the time. And I think if like truly that would hopefully line up your values appropriately. Right. Automatically.
Right. And knowing just because you do that doesn't mean that there's going to be an abundance. Like God's still sovereign. If He wants to rip that, He can rip that.
Yeah, and we'll define abundance, right?
Totally.
So again, we could just dive into all of that too.
Right.
all the different side hatches for sure.
Yeah.
So the follow-up I had to that was pretending you just engaged with that in Hunter and you asked a series of why questions and you're starting to get into the meat of it and push back. What sort of excuses or pushback, maybe you've had this conversation before, maybe you've engaged with this, would you expect from someone as you're pushing back against this and trying to, like you said, it's a harmony. So we're not completely ignoring the business side of things, but focusing more and being more intentional at home first.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that a lot of times, again, the intentions are good out of the gate, especially, you know, if we're talking from an entrepreneurial perspective, you know, we've done it. A lot of people, you know, listening have done it where you just take an idea and you create all the pieces and parts, and maybe it's brick and mortar, maybe it's not. You put it out into the market. Like that takes a significant amount of risk, effort, focus, you know what I mean, and push, and it's not a bad thing. And so I think what happens though is that it's hard. And I think one of the keys that I'm wanting to make sure I articulate well is that I feel that as a society, especially as men, we've gotten very good at being busy, but not really being productive. Like, and I almost stress myself out by, I'm just like so busy, you know, like, but like really were you like actually like moving the needle, like actually like 12 hours today? Like probably not. Like a lot of it was wasted time, you know, maybe I'm jumping on social media, you know, whatever. It's like, you know, how are we actually utilizing our time? So kind of come back to those habits, being intentional with our time, creating those morning routines that like get your mind going, you know, and then coming back to it, like, you know, what are the goals? I mean, to me, defining success is the ability to control my time. So like that's it for me. So I don't need to work 12 hours a day to get it to a certain point, but I do want to get to a certain point where I can be anywhere at any time for anything with my family, no matter what, and not have anything stop moving. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, you know, it's just the intentionality piece again, I think, in the conversations and the habits that we form to say, like, am I moving the needle forward with my kids? Am I there, you know, to experience those conversations? Like, I think, you know, I always think about the table, and like this, it has so much significance in my own personal life for, you know, a lot of reasons in my story, but you know, like the dinner table and like how much I want like my family to always, no matter what, like that's a habit. Like we come home, everybody sits down, we're going to eat, we're going to have intentional conversation. And I never want to miss that, you know, because I'm working. Like really, like what if something happened, you know, my daughter wanted to share it so bad and I missed it.
Right.
Or like, I mean, she doesn't give a rip, you know, if I do a little more to go to, you know, I mean, whatever.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, we got to be there. We got to be present. And being present doesn't mean just being home either. I think we can be physically there and gone up here. So some of that, again, it's habits of turning it off and like actually being able to come into, you know, the space, and that could lead into a whole nother conversation. But
no, that's so good, man. I love that last piece that you just said of just because you're home doesn't mean you're actually home.
Yeah.
I've seen that in my own life as I've run this business. There are times when I come home and all day I'm critical thinking, and then I get home and I still have my critical thinking hat on. And 99.999% of the time, my wife doesn't need my critical thinking hat. Yeah. Like she just needs me to be empathetic. She needs me to be there for her. Like she doesn't need me to critical think in our home. Like that's not ever something that's actually beneficial for us. And so that's something that I don't know. I guess that would maybe be a question for you. What does that look like for you of taking that business owner hat off for you and putting on your like your dad and husband hat on? What does that look like?
Yeah. Dude, I mean, the encouragement for myself and for anyone, you know, us or anybody like watching or listening is like, we're all working at this, you know what I mean? And doing our best, and you're not going to get it right all the time. And, you know, there's grace, you know, I need it in these conversations, you know what I mean? And, but I think my wife catches me in this all the time, and it opens my eyes, and like, maybe it seems funny, but like, it gets me, you know, where she's like talking to me and she'll stop and she'll go, "What are you thinking about?" And I'm like, "Good question. because I'm not actually engaged in our conversation. Like seriously, because you're thinking about like 10 things that happened and like, okay, what I got to do now to like, change this and move this,
right.
It's hard sometimes to separate that. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of men have, like, I think, dude, I mean, I could talk about this all day long, but as a society, men have become very weak. And I think that there's this thing where it's like, when I get home from work, I worked all day, so I'm tired, and like, oh, and I'm gonna, take some time for myself, and all these things. It's like, and I'm not talking about like just like specific, roles or whatever, but like, we got to turn it up when we get home. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not gonna give my family the scraps of my day. And even just saying that and making sure, like, and I mean, I'll never forget somebody said that to me. It's like, when you get home every night, is your family getting what's left of you or like the best of you? And that's important, dude. I mean, I don't want, again, like my girls to hate my entrepreneurial spirit. I want them to grow up loving entrepreneurialism because of the freedom and the time that it gave us as a family. Not being like, man, my dad was always just like wrecked and like tired and like grinding. You know what I mean? It's like, we want to show like, hey, what a blessing, that we get to make a difference in the world. We get to better other people's lives. And at the same time, like, we get to have a lot of fun and grow a great family legacy. Right. And that's not easy, dude. I mean, I get, like, I like having a little bit of a drive home and you kind of like reset, the mind. It's like,
right.
I'm not going in to like lay on the couch. I'm going in to turn it up, like engage. It's bath time probably, the dog's running around. I got a naked baby crawling across the floor, and there's a good chance, like, my wife, she runs her business. She also stays at home. Like, she's probably stressed. I mean, that's hard, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, most challenging job in the world is stay at home. I'll say parent. And so just knowing that and having the wherewithal to like go home and serve my family better than I would go out and serve my team and my business. Right. It's different.
So
right.
Good. Yeah.
Well, it's funny how this always works out, but people always get a nice natural segue for me. Because the next piece I was going to want to touch on was talking about some of the harder pieces of this shift, and shifting from what I wrote down was countercultural, from prioritizing family over the grind or simplicity over flash. And so we've kind of touched on some of these things, but I would love to hear if there's any other pieces that you know of where it's a hard act of intentionality to, again, not make an entire shift, but harmonize the two and make sure they're both taken care of.
Yeah. So you're asking like other examples beyond, grind and family, versus
right.
like,
well, yeah,
the
and
cultural side of it too.
Yeah. The example we just had was, it's really, it's intentional and hard to take off the hat and turn off the mind and engage with the family and not just go lay on the couch. So there are other pieces of, even from, in the morning when you have your podcast, you have to make sure that you have to get up a little earlier and sacrifice some sleep or whatever that looks like. Any of the harder pieces where, it's not going to be easy, but that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the first thing that even jumped into my mind is like that vital harmony of husband and father, right? Like you can even remove the business for a minute, and I don't know about anybody else, but man, as a dad, it's like, it's really easy to, and as a parent, it's really easy to you put everything into your kids. Like, they take all of your energy. Like, my daughters at the time of this recording, I love the absolute mess out of them. Like, I literally can't even you get that just like, oh, I just want to squeeze you. But it's like, they're 3.5 and 8 months. And it's a fun season, but it's like, it's loud and it's full court press, right? Like, it's like on. And it's so easy for my wife and I to just like, you kind of just play, like the zone defense, and like you're kind of running and doing this stuff and like not engaging in our marriage.
Like more reactive, just like survival.
Dude, you're survival mode.
Right.
And like, if you're not careful and intentional, your roommates basically trying to like raise these kids and kind of like run this business and do this life. And that's where it can be so stressful. And so that important, hard whatever, everything's hard, right? You know, you kind of read those quotes like this is hard and that is hard. Like, you know, it's all hard if you want it to be. But the important piece of that is like, okay, how do we actually prioritize our marriage within this? You know, because, okay, I can prioritize the business. I can prioritize my fitness. I can prioritize, you know, growth. I can prioritize reading, you know, but like, am I prioritizing my relationship with God and with my wife, you know, or not? Because like, hello, all right, like A1, you know, like, it's like, we gotta do that. And I think the conversations, so that you don't get to the point where it's like, I just feel like, you know, we're missing each other. Right. You know, we're two ships passing in the night. You know, I hear that all the time, you know, and it's like, dang, like that is tough. And it's real though, dude. Like, the simplicity piece, I feel like all of a sudden it almost like, it sounds really nice to be a lot more simple, you know. I read something the other day. It's like, there's some poor soul out, you know, living in a cabin in the woods that has no idea what's gone on in the last 18 months, you know. It's like, that sounds pretty good.
That does sound really good.
You know, so it's almost like you create more simplicity around your life anyway. But I think that first one I'm kind of thinking of is your relationship between your kids and your wife, and making sure that like we're able to do both, right? You know, beyond just the business side.
So
good. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the statement you would agree with is that, I think the pattern a lot of people fall into, I don't have kids yet, but I've heard a lot, is when you have kids, the natural pattern you fall into is, oh, if I can be the best dad possible, everything else will fall into line, and then I'll be a good husband. But it sounds like what you're saying is, to be the best dad, I actually need to be a better husband first and a better follower of God first, and then those two will bleed into me being a better dad.
For sure, man. Yeah. And I you know, I have two little girls, and so I take super seriously the responsibility to model for them, like, A, what a loving father looks like, but B, what a man looks like.
Yeah.
So I want them to see me like loving their mom well, you know, and see me, you know, PDA at the house, like whatever, you know what I mean? If I snuggle and kiss their mom, like I want them to see that. Right?
Amen.
And be like, oh, this is good. You know what I mean? Like, this is a good thing, you know? And I think kids feel really good about that. Like, you know, you hear so much, and I've experienced it when there's strife at home, it's just like, it's a lot of anxiety, you know, on kids. And I think little kids, and this isn't like a parenting podcast, but, you know, not that I know a lot, but I think little kids, they need to see mom and dad doing really well. And it kind of brings that, like, that feeling of just like, I feel good. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't stressful. Like, this is safe.
Right.
You know,
but not in an unauthentic way where they can't see you fight well too. Like,
totally.
That is just as important, I feel like,
100%.
as the PDA. It has to be both. Like, okay, I just saw dad apologize to mom and then apologize to us.
Yes.
Like, that's what I'm talking about.
Nailed it, bro.
Yeah.
Authenticity, you know what I mean? And the ability to be like, man, I was wrong there.
Yeah.
You know, and like, man, you know what? Even go back to business, you know, it's okay. Like, you're going to screw up. I'm going to make mistakes today, you know, and Monday, you know, and can I go back and be like, you know what, man, I was not present the way I wanted to be last night, you know, 3.5-year-old daughter, like, and I hope that becomes like a, man, like, you're setting up like this trajectory, ideally, of legacy, you know, where it's like, man, this was different. Something was different about that person or my dad, or, you know, that relationship that we had, the way that he ran the business, the way, you know, like, you want to just, what I want at least is to, you know, something was different about that. And what's different, right, is that ultimately we're running after Jesus and trying to model that in the midst of everything we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, I'm curious about the parallel over. Obviously, there's going to be seasons where it's going to be things a little more crazy and hectic at home. But in your personal experience, what has it been like to have that peace and intentionality at home that then allows you to better run your business? You know, so where is the connection there? And maybe you can speak to if there's been a season where things at home have not been peaceful or super well, and then that the carryover that has in your business, because people probably think they're not connected, but they are.
Oh, dude, 100%. Yeah. And I think that's the funny. It's not funny, but like the paradox of like our culture is like the people that you see the most often doing this, you know, and then you hear about like home life or divorces or, you know, whatever. The interesting thing about that is like, I know from my own personal life, when things are rocking at home, like I'm rocking in business. It's like this comfortable, like when my wife and I are in a good place in like our relationship and we're communicating well, and our life, our intimate life, whatever, when that's all like jiving, dude, like, I mean, and it's hard, you have to work at it, but when things are going well, when we're intentional, it's like, dude, I mean, you don't even have to think, like the needle's moving. Yeah. Like you're more successful. Because there's support, there's backing. Everybody's like, I'm like, dude, I'm on top of the world right now. Like I can conquer anything,
It becomes a launching pad.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Versus, and I've 100% been there where I'm like, man, I know, like Elise and I have been at each other's throats the last week. We're just kind of nitpicking. Everybody's a little frustrated, it's like she's tired, I'm tired, nobody's sleeping, it's like I didn't communicate well on this, and so that felt selfish, and and then it's like no matter what you do, you're not as effective because you're just kind of frustrated, there's just like stress and anxiety behind that. It's really hard to be focused and intentional and have the energy, you know what I mean? So I think that's what's important for me to remember, is that when I do home well first, I'm going to do marketplace better. And I'm going to be more successful at the end of the day. I'm going to move the needle further, faster.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Which is so backwards from what I think a lot of people hear in the self-help world or the business world. It's all about pushing the business first. And most of the time it feels like ignoring the foundation of the launching pad and separating those worlds and not having, the harmony there that we've been talking about.
I heard a guy the other day say, like, if you need to divorce your wife, do it so that you can. I mean, like, if she's holding you back, like, get rid of whatever. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I'm like, I'm like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, how is this what, like, literally 1 million people are responding to right now?
Wow. Right.
Like, come on, man. So I think that's why we're having these conversations.
Wow.
Missing it. Powerful. Man, we're missing it in the world.
Ooh. Well, yeah, in that context, as you mentioned in our fake conversation with Hunter, asking him what his definition of success is, with this entire premise and idea, and even as you talk about this podcast example of someone saying divorce your wife because their idea of success is something that's not the home first, what would be I'm putting you on the spot, but what would be your 1 to 2 sentence definition of success where there's that harmonization of the business and the home life, and doing both well and prioritizing the home life so that the business life can do well?
Success for me is, first of all, the ability to control my time. Like that's the one like sentence kind of, that I think about a lot.
Right.
And so within that context comes our entire conversation. When I have the ability to control my time, am I using it through habit and through intentionality to do well at home? And then the second, like the ability to control my time, the second piece is like, at the end, did I leave a legacy of humility, of courage, of empowerment, of modeling, godly, masculinity to my family, to, leaving a legacy essentially, and a legacy being the relationships, was I a great friend? Was I a great husband? Was I, focused and intentional? So I guess that's not like a 1 to 2 sentence, but if I had to, it's the control my time, leave a legacy of, the authentic, focused, humble, person that made a difference.
Come on.
And behind that falls, everything that we've been talking about. And again, like, dude, I me too. Like I go through the battles and the struggles and the questions, and it's like, I know this is what I literally just said, like, this is what I want. And yet here I am, behaving in this way or, acting in this way. And so it's a daily process. I don't think we ever get there, I don't think we ever arrive somewhere. It's like every day I got to get up, I got to put on, the armor, right, for all the things that are going to try to pollute my thinking or, whatever. And I got to like remind myself to be intentional in these things again. And I'm going to make mistakes, and thank God there's grace in that. And I'm going to apologize when I need to, and I'll be authentic. But I'm also going to take my role as a man very seriously, you know what I mean? And lead and be what I believe God designed us to be, and push forward. So,
wow.
It's so good.
Yeah, that was really good. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, as we kind of get close to wrapping up, is there anything you wanted to? Great. Want to make sure I hadn't missed you at all.
No, I thought that was. I mean, we've been getting into some good stuff. This is probably one of my favorite podcasts that we've recorded because this is just like this is it. This is got to be the bread and butter. And for the people that are listening, that are like, man, I'm listening to this and I'm realizing that my priorities are off. Yeah. There's grace for that, but like you got to start now of redefining what success means to you, because that's
sure.
What success means to you really defines everything, because everybody's looking for significance and success, and so how you define that defines your life. And so man, I hope that this is convicting in a lot of different ways for people that are listening.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and knowing, I mean, I always hear and say, like, best time to plant a tree was, 20 years ago. Second best time is today. Right. Yeah. And so it's okay. I think, again, like, you don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, like my kids are in middle school and I just, I'm missing it. It's like, no, it's all right. Like, today, we start and we think differently. Right. And we think further, because you can have that same impact, same influence on the next generation and be a chain breaker, right? That maybe you didn't have, at any point, and that's kind of my goal too.
Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah, to wrap up, I usually have 2 go-to questions.
Cool.
The first one would be, of everything we've talked about and kind of sorted through and processed, what would really be the one big takeaway? I feel like I have an idea what you're going to say, but what would be the one big takeaway that you want people to make sure they walk away with today after hearing this conversation?
Sure. I think for me, it's more than anything, just kind of sitting back and thinking about really what we want. For me, it's, I really want men to step into their roles and take responsibility and kind of redefine, what being successful means, what I mean? And really look at the habits that we're doing every day, and is that moving the needle towards or further away from what we say we want? And starting at home, and making sure that that's where, like, we get that right first, like God put that as our most intimate sphere. Let's crush that, what I mean? And then go out, and as we're doing that, make sure we make a difference in the world.
Yeah, that's good. That was pretty close to what I thought you was going to say. So
somewhere around there.
I thought it might just be intentionality and authenticity done.
That would have been maybe a more powerful ending. So thank you.
We'll just cut the table.
I did. Yeah, that's good.
So the last thing I always love to ask is, if you were able to step in my shoes or sit in my chair and interview yourself, what would be one question that you wish I would have asked, or an idea I would have brought up that you think would have been really good to kind of drive all this home, or like a core piece of this?
Good question. Kind of put on the spot a little bit.
I get that answer a lot.
Yeah. I think one thing that always drives all of it home for me is like the conversation around masculinity. What's that mean? And is it important? Is it toxic? Right. And can we have that conversation? Is it, can we have both? Defining that for our culture now, I think is, to me, vital. And so, coming around men and what's it mean to be a masculine male, and what's, God's definition of all that kind of stuff, and how do we do it? So
yeah,
there's the question.
Well, unfortunately, it's probably like a whole nother podcast.
It is. Yeah, it is.
We'll have to have you back on. Talk about it.
It's another episode.
That's right.
There you go. Awesome. Well, yeah, Dr. Dan, thank you so much for coming on this morning. It was a pleasure. And yeah, this was super enriching, even for myself, for someone who's married with no kids. So thank you for the reminder, the priorities, and especially being humble throughout all of it, and knowing that you've not nailed it and you're still striving towards getting better and better towards it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thank you for the opportunity, guys. It's an honor to be here. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Beyond Business podcast. As always, we're hoping there's a piece of value that you can take away and apply to your life or business. And if you found some encouragement in this particular episode, share it with your network or friends, especially if you know that they could take something away from this for themselves as well.
Check out our website, beyondbluemedia.com. We're a digital marketing company and would love to help out your business if you're interested or in need of marketing. And just mention that you found us on the podcast and we would love to hook you up. So talk to you soon and thanks for listening.